Today's story is one of the worst tragedies Idaho has ever seen. Joseph Duncan was a brutal killer and the embodiment of evil. Bumper stickers that read "Kill Duncan" can still be seen in North Idaho today. That's how bad he was. Sheriff's detectives and jurors who reviewed and studied the evidence said that this one case changed them forever. The horrific nature, the violence, and the young age of the innocent victims brought national attention to this case. Joseph Edward Duncan was a ruthless child abuser and killer. Thank goodness he isn't around today to be able to harm any more children or adults, because he does have some adult victims. But what he has done will stay with so many families for decades to come. Hello and welcome back to Crime, Mystery and Mayhem with Kate. If this is your first visit to my channel, hello, welcome. It is great to have you here. Here on my channel I talk about true crime stories. I find them interesting and I'm quite intrigued as to why some people do the horrific things that they do. I don't get it. Hence why I am going to be studying criminology and criminal law. Going to university starting this week. Can't wait. It's, oh my goodness. I'm kind of scared though. Anyway, please remember to like this video and subscribe to my YouTube channel because it would really help me in my attempts to grow my channel. Okay, so today I'm going to be talking about a case that I nearly didn't do because this case just really, it really gets to me. But I'm doing it anyway. So this is about Joseph Duncan. He was a really sick man. A horrible, disgusting piece of crap. But first, before I go into the story, there's a warning. So I'm going to be talking about child abuse, SA towards children. It's a really disturbing case. This man was a pedophile, and this case has a lot of talk about horrible crimes that were committed on children. So if this is a subject that you just cannot deal with, because I am the same, like if a story comes up and it's about, you know, abuse towards children, I'm like, no, I can't. Like sometimes I just, no, I can't. Feel free to click out and come back with a different story. Because this is a horrible story. But also these children, you know, they went through so much, and I'm really proud of the little girl who made it through, but I'll be talking about her at the end. Anyway, let's jump in. So Joseph Edward Duncan, he was the third born out of 5 kids. He had 4 sisters, 1 brother. He was the second youngest. His parents were Joseph Edward Duncan Jr. and Lillian Mae Duncan. So he had those 3 older sisters and he had a little brother. Joseph's dad was in the United States Army, and his family would move quite often because of his dad's job. So Joseph didn't really get a chance to be like a proper kid. You know how you grow up in a neighborhood, you get to know people, you start off at kindergarten with them, you end up going to high school with the same kids. Yeah, he didn't get that. He was going from school to school to school, from, you know, place to place to place, all over America. It's quite full on. So they ended up finally settling in Tacoma, Washington when he was about 12. He stayed for a while. His mum was apparently a really domineering woman. She didn't really show too much love towards her kids. Joseph said that she abused him, but we don't know if it's true. Joseph said that he was SA'd as a kid, but his brother said nothing ever happened. So yeah, we don't know. I guess we won't know for sure, you know. Yeah. So in 1979, Joseph Duncan's parents split up and they got divorced in 1983, which really, it affected Joseph so badly. And then the kids had to kind of decide which household they wanted to move to. So Joseph, he stayed with his mum, which is weird because he said that she was domineering and whatnot. But anyway, he stayed with his mum, and his younger brother went with the dad, while the older sisters, they kind of just went off on their own, started their lives. So his dad would later get remarried, and Joseph ended up with a step family. I don't know too much about the step family or his relationship with his dad later. There's not actually that much about his family life. Yeah, So Jason, why do I keep calling him Jason? Joseph went to Lake High School, but he seemed to struggle after his parents separated, and he didn't end up graduating. He started his criminal career quite young, and he had a long history of violent sexual predator type crimes, even as a teenager. In 1978, when he was just 15 years old, he committed his first recorded sex crime. This was a really disturbing attack. I hate these ones. He grabbed a 9-year-old boy and he R-worded him at gunpoint. This poor little boy would have been absolutely terrified. That kind of thing just really breaks my heart. The following year, he stole a car and he was arrested pretty quick for this. And he was sentenced as a juvenile and sent to the Jesse Dislin Boys Ranch in Tacoma. Apparently, while he was there, he told a therapist, so he had to go to therapy sessions like every week, and he told this therapist that was assigned to him that he had bound and essayed 6 young boys. At this stage, he's only like 15, 16, and he's already done this. He also went on to tell this therapist that he had R-worded a lot of boys and had committed these crimes by the time he was 16. He said that the number of boys was large, and there were 13 young boys that he'd taken. He bound them and assaulted them. This is honestly so disturbing. This is just the beginning when he's young. Seriously, it's horrible. I don't understand how anyone can commit this type of crime on a child. This type of crime on anyone, but a child, someone so young, so innocent. I just don't understand. This guy clearly had some major issues from such a young age, and we don't know exactly how many victims he had because some of the kids didn't come forward. They didn't press charges. I get it. They were scared. Like, that's a lot for a little one to go through. In 1980, Joseph stole a bunch of guns from his neighbor, and he also abducted a 14-year-old boy. This poor boy was subjected to the R word while he was being held at gunpoint. This boy told his parents about what had happened to him, and they went to the police. Joseph was picked up, dragged down to the station, and eventually he went to court, and he was found guilty of this crime, and he was sentenced to 20 years in prison. So it's like, oh yay, cool, it's over, right? No. The annoying thing is this sicko was released on parole in 94 after serving only 14 years. Like, that really bothers me. That really, really, really bothers me. You hear about these people who do these horrific, disgusting crimes and they get early release. Like, what's the point of sentencing someone to a certain number of years just to let them leave early? No, they don't deserve it. I know some people get early release for good behavior, but I personally believe this kind of person that commits these crimes against children, they don't deserve to be considered for early release. No. He should have got way longer, in my opinion. Like, no, you don't let someone like that out. Anyway, that boy, he'll be living with this for his entire life. The struggles of everyday life will be horrible. It's just not right that Joseph got to walk after serving 14 years of a 20-year sentence. So while Joseph was out on parole, he was a bit of a transient. Like, he got himself a girlfriend and stuff, and he was known to have lived in several places in the Seattle area. So he was like going from place to place, staying with his girlfriend for long periods of time, but also, bopping around other places. He never stayed anywhere too long, except for with his girlfriend. He seemed to stay with her for a bit longer. So this time, so he was caught in 1996. He got arrested again, and it was for marijuana. So he was using some weed, and it was against his parole, and he got picked up, and they released him pretty quick. So he only sat in jail for a few weeks before he was let out and given some new parole conditions. It's like, oh, slap on the wrist, there you go, out you go. Oh, yeah. So around this time in 96, police thought that Joseph killed these 2 children. One was Sammiejo White and Carmen Cubias in Seattle. And then in 1997, there was another child that died. This was Anthony Martinez in Riverside County, California. So these crimes at that time, they went cold. They could not find who did it. Also, they were committed during his parole period. So at the time that he's supposed to be, you know, being watched. That's why they should have just left him in jail. Like, it annoys me, because if they had kept him in prison to serve that 20 years for the essay that he'd done to that child in the beginning, then these children would still be alive today. Also, both of these murder cases stayed cold and weren't tied to Joseph until after his arrest, like much later. So on July the 6th, 1996, 11-year-old Sammiejo and her sister 9-year-old Carmen disappeared after they left the Crest Motel on Aurora Avenue North in Seattle. So they left at about 11 p.m. I know that's so young for them to be going out. Their older brother had asked them if they could pop down the road to buy some smokes. I know, and they were like, okay, and I know, sending his little sisters out at 11 o'clock at night is not a good idea, but, you know, I questioned it as well. But let's not blame the brother, okay? I also wondered when I was reading that part, like, where were the parents? Because my children are usually asleep at 11 o'clock at night, but yeah. Anyway, I wondered where were the parents? And then I read that their mum, Margaret, she had 5 kids, and they were all staying in this motel for the night. And she had popped out to go get some food. And when she came back to this motel room with the food, she realized that 2 of her daughters were missing. So she told her 15-year-old son to go and look for them. I'm assuming she was pissed off at him because, you know, he sent them out. And so he went out and he looked everywhere for his sisters, but he couldn't find them, like, at all, anywhere. He looked everywhere. They weren't anywhere to be seen. So that he came back to the room and told his mum, and then she went out looking. So she's looking and looking for ages, and she could not find her kids, and she reported them missing. At the time, the police didn't know whether the girls had just run away or were victims of foul play. I feel like their ages, I don't feel like they would have run away, but I don't know. Anyway, then on February the 10th, 1998, these little girls were found, but this wasn't a happy reunion because these girls were dead, and their skeletal remains were found by a transient living in an abandoned barn near Northeast 195th Street and 120th Avenue Northeast in the North Creek area of Bothell. So their bodies were taken away for a post-mortem, and the King County Medical Examiner's Office said that the girls were most likely killed quite quickly after they disappeared. And from what I've read, the girls, they were hit in the heads with a crowbar, and Joseph, because he did it, would later say that these killings were revenge killings. Yeah, revenge killings. Because remember how he wetted that boy at the beginning? Well, he was annoyed that he got put in jail for 14 years. He was supposed to do 20. So he was annoyed. He wanted revenge. So he went out and he attacked these girls. He's a despicable monster. Also with the other boy I was just talking about, Anthony Martinez, the little boy that do I say that right? Martinez? I don't know. Anyway, he was in the neighbor's backyard. He was with his brother. He was 10 years old and his brother was 6. They were playing with the other kids, just having fun. They're young. Then all of a sudden, their dad, he hears screaming coming from, in that garden. These children were screaming and they were saying, "A man's got Tony." Anthony Tony, that's his nickname. Their dad rushed outside and he saw his 6-year-old. His 6-year-old was actually limping and he was coming towards him. One shoe was on and one shoe was off, and he was saying the same thing, that a man took Tony. Their dad, he ran inside, he grabbed the phone, he called 911, he grabbed his keys and he began searching for his son. He looked and looked and looked. He would go back and check home, maybe his son came home, but there was no sign of Tony. He was gone. This man searched non-stop for 3 days looking for his child. Then, 15 days later, Anthony's body was found. Mark, his 6-year-old brother, said that a tall, thin white man in a white car pulled into the alley that was behind the neighbor's house, where he was playing with the neighborhood kids and his brother. This man approached the fence and he called to the children. So he was like, "Hey guys, come over here, I just need to show you something." And the kids were like, "Okay," because kids are naive. And the kids go over to him and he pulled out a picture of a cat, and he said that this was his cat and that his cat's missing. And he said, "If you can help me, find my cat, I'll give you guys $1 each." So these kids, they're gonna be like, okay. So 3 of the boys were like, "Yeah, we'll help you look for your cat." They want $1. And after they searched in the alley, the kids went back and told the man that they could not find his cat, but he just gave them the $1 each anyway for their efforts. Then, all of a sudden, out of the blue, before they knew it, this man had pulled a knife out. He actually went to grab 6-year-old Mark, but Tony jumped in the way, and Mark was able to break free. So he got hold of Tony, and he was holding the knife to Tony's head, and he was dragging him to the car, this poor child, and then he was gone. They never saw Tony alive again. So freaking sad. So yeah, initially the target was 6-year-old Mark, but yeah, that's so sad. Tony was protecting his brother. He was the big brother, he's protecting his little brother, and he got taken and killed and essayed, and a lot of bad stuff happened to him that I'll talk about more. He was just trying to protect his little brother. Then in 1997, Joseph was back in prison for violating his parole again. I'm not sure what he did this time, but yeah, I think I heard that he stole a car or something like that. It was either stealing a car or smoking some weed. He got chucked back into prison, where he stayed for 3 years until he was released on July the 14th, 2000. They should have left him. Should have left him in there. He got released for good behavior. Yeah. And moved to Fargo, North Dakota. In March of 2005, he was charged with the July 3rd, 2004 molestation of 2 boys at a playground in Detroit Lakes, Minnesota. On April 5th, 2005, he appeared before Becker County judge, who set bail at $15,000. So he molested some kids. I don't know their names or anything about them. And this is, yeah, so he was going to go to jail. But a Fargo businessman who had become acquainted with him, he actually posted bail for him. So he gets out on this $15,000 bail, and then he just bolts it and disappears. So on June the 1st, 2005, a federal warrant was issued for his arrest on the charge of unlawful flight to avoid prosecution. So Joseph, he had headed to northern Idaho. He got himself a rental vehicle and he was on his way. He was watching this family. He was quite intrigued by this family. They had a couple of little kids. He was just watching them, from the shadows, being creepy. He even bought night vision goggles to spy on this family at night. So he would just kind of sit and watch them. This went on for a few days until he decided, I'm gonna attack. On May 15th, 2005, Brenda, is it Groene? Her boyfriend Mark and her 3 children had been at a barbecue. It was getting late and they decided to make their way home. They all got ready for bed, and while 8-year-old Shasta, this is their daughter, was in her room, she said that she thought she saw someone in her closet. She was scared. So she's in her bedroom. She thinks someone's in her closet. She's scared, and she called out for her 9-year-old brother, Dylan. And he came into her bedroom, and he jumped into bed with her and, to help her fall asleep. And Dylan is an awesome name because that's my son's name, which makes this sad, even more sad. So a couple of hours later, after these kids had gone to sleep, her mum came into her bedroom. She was crying, she was frantic, she looked really scared, and she shook the kids awake. She told them that someone was in the house and she wanted to get them out. So, yeah, she's like, you got to get up. So she and Dylan went to through the family room, where they were met with their stepdad Mark and their brother Slade, face down on the ground with zip ties around their wrists and ankles, and they had duct tape over their mouths. These kids would have been terrified. There was a man in their living room, and he was holding a gun. He then told Brenda, their mum, to get on the ground as well. He then bound Shasta's hands and feet and carried her and Dylan outside before returning to the house. Dylan and Shasta could hear shouting and screaming and crying coming from inside. Then there were bangs. Slade, he came running out. He was injured. But the man, he followed him. Slade's only 13. Poor guy. So he comes out, and the guy's following him, and grabs him, drags him back inside. There was another loud bang. These aren't gunshots, by the way. This man, he had killed Brenda, Mark, and 13-year-old Slade. Then Joseph, because it was Joseph, went outside. He grabbed Dylan and Shasta, and he put them into his rental vehicle. On Monday, May the 16th, 2005, Bob Hollingsworth walked across his property towards the Groen's home. Slade had actually done some yard work for Bob. He wanted to make some extra pocket money, and Bob was like, "Yep." So he did some yard work for him, and he was going to pay him next time he saw him, like the next day. So he was heading over to the house to give Slade this money, because Slade is a really great kid. But it was strange because he couldn't see anyone. The cars were in the driveway, but he couldn't see anyone. So he was like looking around, like, where are they? And he saw that the back door was open, and he called out like, "Hello, Slade, I'm here to pay you." But nobody replied. Then he like poked his head in, and he saw blood all up the walls. He panicked, and he called the police. The police arrived really quick, and when they arrived, they could hear the family dog. The family dog was inside, it was barking away, but everything else was just completely silent. They went through the back door because it was already open, and they saw blood absolutely everywhere. They walked further into the home, and the deputies saw 3 bodies laying on the floor. This poor family had been ruthlessly murdered in the most horrific of ways. So the police, they secure the scene, and they block off the street. No one's coming in, no one's going out. The grandma, they actually saw on the news, and she recognized the house, so she needed to make her way over there. 13-year-old Slade was laying on the floor with his arms taped and zip tied behind his back, and his face was duct taped. His head, which was badly beaten in, it was laying at the feet of his mother. 40-year-old Brenda was bound the same way as her son, with similar injuries to her head. They'd all been beaten so badly. 37-year-old Mark, her boyfriend, he was also bound, and like Brenda and Slade, he was laying with his feet by Brenda's head. This was a truly horrific crime. The first responding deputy, he knew this family, and when he was looking around, he realized that there were 2 children missing. Where were they? Where were these 2 kids? They looked all over the house. They looked everywhere. They couldn't find them. Were they hiding? They couldn't find them. So with 3 murder victims and 2 missing children, this police department had their work cut out for them, and they needed to contact the Idaho State Police and the FBI. Where were the missing children? We know where they are. They're with that disgusting piece of crap getting put through God knows what. So police got in touch with these children's dad, just to check maybe the kids were with him, or maybe they, fled the scene and they made their way to him or something. They talked to neighbors and friends, but nobody had seen the missing children. They just vanished. Search groups were immediately dispatched. maybe these kids were hiding, they were thinking. Like, you know, that would be a terrifying sight to witness. Maybe they ran off when the assault started, but we know that didn't happen. That wasn't the case at all. They'd been kidnapped. So while the ground searches continued, the murder scene at the house was being carefully examined. So based on the body temperature of the victims, the coroner had determined that they had been deceased for about 24 hours. Their cause of death was bludgeoning and blunt force trauma to their heads. There was one fingerprint, and it was found on the front door, and that was collected, but the door hadn't been like broken in or anything like that, so they thought maybe, you know, the culprit was somebody that knew the family, like maybe they let him in. An Amber Alert was issued, and it was issued really quick for Shasta and Dylan. It feels so weird saying Dylan because I say Dylan all the time because it's my son. My son's 13, his name's Dylan. So sad. Police actually thought the killer and child abductor was their father, their biological father, just for a little bit of time there. Stephen, that's their dad, he was a musician. He spent, you know, a lot of time going partying, drinking at bars, hanging out with, you know, motorcycle gangs. He would associate with the rough crowd. So Stephen and Brenda, they were together for a while there. They were married, but they broke up because she didn't want to do that lifestyle. It wasn't what she wanted for her children. She wanted a better life for the kids. She wanted to be a responsible parent. So after they separated, she did get custody, which of course would have annoyed Stephen, but no, he wasn't the killer. We know this. A few days later, the medical examiner determined that the weapon used in the killings was a large framing hammer. These people were beaten with a hammer. This child, Slade. Oh God, I hate it when it's children. I can't do any more kid cases after this one, seriously. So a blood analysis had been performed at the scene, and it determined that essentially all of the blood around the house by the back door and in the grass belonged to 13-year-old Slade. So he's like trying to get away. He was running. He was trying to get out of there. No blood was found belonging to Dylan or Shasta. This was a good sign for detectives because these kids, you know, there's no blood at the scene from them. They could be alive. So Steve did a press conference, that's their dad, and he begged everybody who's watching, like, you know, on TV and whatnot, for his children to be returned home. Thousands of tips came in after Steve went on TV. People were saying that they saw these children in different places. The search was continuing, but nobody could find these kids. The tips are coming in, but they're not leading to anything. Volunteers started helping, and they were going door to door. They were handing out flyers. Did anybody know where these children were? This small community, it just seemed to feel like Shasta and her brother Dylan were their children as well, and they were so determined to bring these kids home. That's kind of like here in New Zealand. If something happens to a child, everybody feels like they're our kid as well, and they, you know, or our family member. We wanted to do whatever we can. So for 40 days, they searched everywhere. These kids were missing for so long. They didn't know where the kids were or who brutally murdered Brenda, Mark, and Slade. On July the 2nd, about a month and a half after the murders, a call came in to 911. The manager from a local Denny's said that they had a man at their diner, and he was with a little girl that looked like Shasta. So later, a waitress at this Denny's spoke to police, and she told them what happened. She noticed at about 1:45 a.m. that there was a man. He'd come into Denny's, and he had this little girl with him. And they were sitting at this table, and she thought, like, this is weird because, I mean, like, it's 1:45 a.m. Who takes their small child? She's 8. Who takes their small child to a Denny's at 1:45 a.m.? Exactly. So she noticed that the young girl she looked really sad. She was dirty. Her hair was dirty. Her clothing looked like it hadn't been washed, like in a really long time. she just looked really scared. This waitress felt in her gut that something was going on here, and she felt like that little girl looks like Shasta. She knew she had to do something. She needed to help this child. If that is the missing little girl, she has to help her. So she went and she spoke to her manager, and her manager, you know, peeked out, had a look, and she was like, oh my God, it does look like the little girl that's missing. So this story, it was all over the news. Everyone knew about these missing children and what they looked like. The manager, she then called 911, and then she acted normally. Like, the waitress just went about her shift. They were acting normal while, you know, waiting for the police. And when the police arrived, the waitress, she just stepped out without this man, Joseph, seeing her, and they spoke to her, and then she went back inside. As she came back inside, this man, Joseph, and Shasta were walking to the bathroom, and he said to the waitress that they need their check. They're gonna be going now, and he seemed to be in a bit of a rush. So she was like, yeah, sure, okay, no worries. And she, you know, went and sorted out the check, brought it over to him. That's when the police walked in. They made a beeline towards Joseph and Shasta. They asked him if they could speak with him just for a minute. Then they escorted him out of the restaurant. So they needed to do it very, very calmly, because there was this little child. They don't know what he's going to do. So the little girl, she stayed back. And the police asked the waitress if she could go over and, you know, sit with her until they finish what they're doing. So she went over, she sat with this little girl, and she asked this little girl, what's your name? And this girl said, my name is Shasta Groene. That is when this waitress leapt and hugged this little girl so tightly. She had been saved. She saved her. But where's Dylan? Shasta was taken to the hospital while Joseph was taken into police custody. Detectives found a red Jeep Cherokee rental, the car that he'd rented, but it had been reported stolen because he hadn't brought it back. And that's when they figured out that this man was Joseph Duncan, a man with a very long police record, and he had committed crimes against children. He was questioned at the police station and asked, where is Dylan? Oh my God, I feel like I've said that before. Where's Dylan? It could be anywhere. Where's Dylan? That's when Joseph asked for a lawyer. But they had Dylan's sister. She could tell them where he was, right? So she had been with Joseph for 47 days. 47 horrific days where so much happened to her. And I am not going to go into everything that happened to her because I can't. It's so bad. This poor child and her brother, they went through absolute hell. But they had each other. While Shasta was in the hospital, her dad and grandma, they rushed to her side. She was so relieved. She said when she woke up, she was so happy to see her dad and her grandma. Finally, the family had some positive news after everything that had happened, you know, with the murders and the children going missing. But still, where is Dylan? The detectives were very nice, and they spoke to Shasta, and they basically gained her trust, and they asked her, where's your brother Dylan? She told them, oh my God, this is the part that really gets me. She looks at the police and she goes, Dylan, he's in heaven. How heartbreaking is that? Oh my God. Seriously. She told them that he might be in the Lolo forest because that's where they had gone with Joseph. The Lolo National Forest is in northwest Montana in the town of St. Regis. This area is about 100 miles east of Shasta's house, and it is thick with brush and trees. Basically really hard to search for someone in there. Like you could go missing in there so easily. So Shasta also told the detectives what had happened to her and her brother while they were with this man for 47 days. This monster. No, he's not a man, he's a monster. So as he drove the two children away from their home after he brutally killed their family, Shasta fell asleep. They had been through so much. And when she woke up, she, looked around, and she asked, "Where are we?" He told her that they were in the Lolo forest in Montana and that nobody could see or hear them. So he's just making sure they know that they ain't going nowhere. He told them his name, and he said his name was Joe, but then told them that they couldn't call him that they had to call him Dad or Daddy or Jet. Joseph threatened the children, and he told them that if they tried to escape, he would shoot them. He told them he would be taking them home to their family, but not yet. These kids at this time thought that their family was still alive because Joseph is telling them that. Then Joseph, he made them pray, and that's when he essayed them. So he was essaying them. That first night, Shasta fell asleep, and she was holding Dylan's hand, and they fell asleep together after this horrible experience. The next day, while Joseph was still asleep, Shasta said that she and Dylan talked, and they were talking about how scared they were, and they're wanting their mum, and she just kind of said to Dylan that, "I promise you we're going to get out of this alive." He's older than her, but she's comforting him. Days passed, then weeks passed, and every single day this disgusting piece of crap was essaying these children. They were terrified, and they just wanted to go home. They wanted their mum. He was also torturing them. They had hardly any food, and they were often chained up. But these children, they knew they had to obey this disgusting piece of crap. So they did what they were told. And there was a squirrel that kept on coming into their camp, and Joseph said to the kids that if you guys can catch it, then I'll let you go home. So they were like, "Oh yeah, that sounds like a good deal." So Dylan was desperately trying to catch this squirrel, and one day he actually got it, and he was like, "Oh my god, I can go home." So they're packing up. He's like, "Yep, you're going home." They're packing up. They thought they were going home. Shasta said that she hugged her brother. They were so happy to be going home. She was standing beside him, just holding his hand. And then all of a sudden, she hears this loud bang. And she felt her brother's hand go limp. And it slipped through her hand. She looked down, and Dylan was on the ground. He was bleeding. He'd been shot. She was so upset. Dylan was crying. He was still alive. And Joseph was like, "Oh crap, he's still alive." He walked over to Dylan and he shot him in the head. Poor Dylan died that day. Then Joseph put Dylan in a tarpaulin, covered him in gasoline, and lit him on fire. Shasta saw all of this. She had seen so much. She's 8 years old. This monster had just taken her brother's life. The person that had been by her side through all of it, her comfort, he was gone. Was she next? Joseph started to feel like he couldn't keep her any longer, and he gave her two choices. He told her, "You can die from a gunshot or strangulation." This little girl at only 8 years old had to choose how she would die. She came to the realization that she was going to die, but she wanted to prolong it. And then Joseph started to strangle her. And she cried out, "Please don't, Jet." He stopped. She just called him by his nickname. He stopped. He looked at her and he started crying. And he asked Shasta if she wanted to go see his mum. She said okay. She didn't really have a choice. He felt like she cared about him because she called him that name. This child was so smart, and she knew if she said that he would stop, maybe. And it worked. She basically manipulated him she started acting like his friend. And when he would say, you know, about going home, she would say, no, I don't want to go home, I want to stay with you. She just said that to survive. She didn't mean it. She wanted to go home. So when she was found without her brother Dylan, they did hold little hope of finding him alive. A gas station employee in Idaho, about 40 miles east from where the children lived, recognized the vehicle as one that had stopped at their station hours before Joseph was arrested. The employee suspected the girl who was wandering around the station might have been Shasta, but did not confront her because nothing seemed to be out of the ordinary. So I've got photos of her walking around this petrol station, and it's just so sad. The employee and her manager notified the police after going through the surveillance camera, and they were looking at it and looking at pictures of the missing kids, and they're like, oh my god, like this is the missing little girl. On July 4th, 2005, investigators found human remains at a remote makeshift campsite in the Lolo National Forest near St. Regis, Montana. So these remains, they were sent to the FBI lab for DNA testing. It was Dylan. Yeah. During the trial, it emerged that Joseph shot Dylan at point blank range by holding a sawed-off 12-gauge shotgun to his head. It's a hard story. Shasta told investigators that they drove a long distance and they stayed in 2 different campsites. Joseph insisted that Dylan's death was actually accidental. There are 2 different versions to the shooting of Dylan, but this is the one the sister tells. So this is the one that I believe to be true. I don't believe that Joseph did it accidentally. I believe he did it on purpose. A public memorial service was held for Dylan on July the 16th, 2005, which would have been his 10th birthday. Joseph's arrest, it led the FBI to launch a nationwide review of unsolved missing children cases. He was implicated as a possible suspect in several crimes that had occurred between 1994 and 1997 when he was on parole, and between 2000 and 2005 when he was free from prison. This man did not stop. This monster did not stop. He continued hurting children. Although he was cleared as a suspect in a lot of the cases, authorities in California and Washington had enough evidence to believe that he had committed the unsolved murders that I spoke about earlier. 10-year-old Anthony Martinez, the boy I spoke about earlier, was playing with his friends and Joseph took him. After a 2-week search, Tony's body was found. He was naked and he was partially decomposed in Idaho, California. This poor little boy had been essayed, bound, and duct taped. Although a composite sketch of the suspect was made available and a partial fingerprint taken from the duct tape found on Tony's body, the case eventually did go cold. In July 2005, bloggers noticed similarities between Joseph and the composite sketch in Tony's case, as well as between Joseph's vehicle and the one Tony's assailant was actually driving. The FBI and National Center for Missing and Exploited Children became involved and in return contacted Riverside County authorities. Riverside authorities were able to match the fingerprint taken from Tony's body to Joseph. There you go. These poor children, my goodness. Joseph actually confessed to killing Tony. He confessed in an interview on July the 19th, 2005, describing the crime. So this interview was with the FBI, and he said that the crime was a revenge crime against society, again, for sending him back to jail. How is it the kid's fault that you keep going into jail? It's your fault. Why am I talking to him? He's dead. Oh yeah, he's dead. He's dead. Awesome. Joseph. So after her rescue, Shasta told investigators that Joseph had told her about other crimes that he committed, and this included Tony's and the 1996 murders of Sammiejo White, who was 11, and her half-sister Carmen, who was 9. Joseph Duncan was convicted in 3 different courts, which makes this part that I'm about to talk about, the legalities of it, really annoying. So in Idaho District Court for the kidnapping and killings of Brenda and Slade and Mark McKenzie, the United States District Court for the District of Idaho for the kidnapping of Shasta and Dylan, the killing of Dylan and the other crimes, the essay, and a California Superior Court for the kidnapping and murder of Anthony Martinez. He first appeared in a Kootenai County Court on July the 13th, 2005, where he was charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder and 3 counts of first-degree kidnapping, all in conjunction with the deaths of Brenda and Slade, and also Mark. County prosecutors had initially planned to charge him with the kidnappings of Shasta and Dylan. However, they deferred those charges to the federal courts, as transporting children across state lines for the purposes of sexual exploitation is a federal offence. So trial was set to begin on January the 17th, 2006, but it was delayed until April the 4th after the district judge granted a request to the defence for more time. So they needed time to prepare for their case, and they wanted to give him the death penalty, so they needed more time. And then again to October the 26th, after the judge in the case stated that no one wants to try this twice, including him, because it's a horrible, horrible case, so they want to get it right. So they're putting it off just to, get all their ducks in a row. So Joseph's attorneys blamed the multiple postponements on the prosecution's insistence on pursuing the death penalty, which is, I don't know why that's a bad thing. Like, he deserves it. I know I don't usually agree with the death penalty, but this guy, yeah. So on October the 16th, 2006, shortly after jury selection began, Kootenai County prosecutors and Joseph's attorney reached a plea bargain. So this was where Joseph pleaded guilty to all state charges against him. He was immediately sentenced to 3 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole for the 3 kidnapping charges. Sentencing on the 3 murder charges was continued pending the outcome of his federal trial on kidnapping and his other killing charges. The judge said that if he did not receive the death penalty on the federal charges, he would return to Kootenai County for a death penalty phase on the state murder charges. Is everyone following? Oh, so many different courts. So over 2 years later, after being sentenced to death on federal charges, Kootenai County sentenced Joseph Duncan to 3 additional life sentences. Joseph also agreed to cooperate with the Kootenai County Sheriff's detectives that were investigating his crimes, and he provided passwords to encrypted files that were found on his computer. Yeah, he had a whole bunch of gross stuff on his computer. So bad. On January the 18th, 2007, Joseph was indicted by a federal grand jury in Idaho on 10 counts of kidnapping resulting in death, little Dylan, aggravated sexual abuse of a minor, and sexual exploitation of a child that resulted in death, and other crimes related to illegal firearm possession and vehicle theft. He was arraigned the following day at a federal court in Boise, where a judge ordered him to stand trial the following March. So this is dragging out because there's so many different, do you guys call it districts in America? States, districts. I'm gonna say districts. So Joseph Duncan's defense attorneys immediately requested a postponement. So now they're requesting a postponement, which was granted the week the trial was originally scheduled to begin, and a new trial date was set for January 22nd, 2008. I know, it's going on and on and on. On December 3rd, 2007, Joseph pleaded guilty to all 10 charges against him. As a condition of the agreement, Shasta Groene would not have to testify in the penalty phase of this trial due to a gag order. Other details of the plea agreement were not released. There was a gag order put in place. So jury selection for the penalty phase for Joseph Duncan's federal trial began on April 14th, 2008. These families are getting dragged through so long. Like, we're at 2008, April 2008. It's just so long for these families to go through this. So during the jury selection, Joseph dismissed his attorneys and he wanted to represent himself. But his attorneys were like, no, that's a stupid idea. And they tried to get a hearing to, so that the judge could be like, no, you need your attorneys. The district court ordered an evaluation of this creep to determine if he was competent, and accepted the evaluator's conclusion that he was completely competent and that he could proceed without his counsel. On August the 27th, 2008, after 3 hours of deliberation, the jury recommended the death penalty, and the judge imposed 3 death sentences for kidnapping resulting in death, sexual exploitation of a child that resulted in death, and the use of a firearm in a violent crime resulting in death, all related to the death of Dylan. Every time I do a case, I always get attached to one, main person. This time it's Dylan. On November 3rd, 2008, Joseph was sentenced to an additional 3 consecutive terms of life without parole in federal prison for kidnapping Shasta, and for essaying Shasta and her big brother. She was 8, he was 9. Joseph's standby counsel filed a notice of appeal, and Joseph subsequently wrote the court and informed it that any appeal was taken against his wishes. In July 2011, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals reserved the district court's decision to permit Joseph to represent himself without first holding a hearing as to his competence to do so, and remanded for a hearing as to this issue. So beginning in September 2012, now we're in 2012, Joseph Duncan was incarcerated at the United States Penitentiary. Is it Terre Haute in Indiana? If I'm saying it wrong, I'm sorry. I'm clearly not from America. On December 6, 2013, a federal judge ruled that he was mentally competent when he gave up the right to appeal his death sentence. Psychiatrists working with the prosecution diagnosed him with pedophilia, sadistic personality disorder, and antisocial personality disorder with narcissistic traits, but maintained that he was legally sane. He just is a sick piece of crap. Ugh. A 3-judge panel of the Ninth Circuit U.S. Court of Appeals ruled on March 27, 2015, that a district judge correctly determined that Joseph was mentally competent when he waived his rights to appeal his death sentence. On February 28, 2016, the United States Supreme Court denied his petition to hear his appeal of a federal judge's ruling in December 2013, which had been affirmed by the Ninth Circuit. On February 28, 2017, a petition for right of habeas corpus was filed. On September 27, 2017, it was ordered that the government's third motion for extension of time was granted in part and denied in part. The government's response was due October the 30th, 2017. I know I haven't spoken about how full on he went into these crimes, but I don't feel comfortable saying what happened to these children, really going into it. It's just so horrible. On January the 18th, 2007, the same day that he was indicted in federal court, Riverside County officials announced that he was charged with Anthony Martinez murder. Despite attempts by Riverside County officials to extradite Joseph to California, including an appeal by Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger, his federal trial proceeded. He was eventually extradited to California on January the 24th, 2009, 5 months after being sentenced to death by the federal court. On March 15th, 2011, Joseph Duncan pleaded guilty to Anthony Martinez's murder, and he was sentenced to 2 life terms on April the 5th, 2011. So as part of a plea deal, this sentence came without the possibility of parole or a right to appeal. These kids, oh my God. So prior to his arrest, Joseph actually kept a personal website. Yeah, because it was called The Fifth Nail. So it was basically, according to law, in addition to the 4 nails used to pierce the body of Jesus Christ in his crucifixion, there was a 5th nail. And apparently this 5th nail had been taken away and it was hidden by the Romans. So Joseph adopted the name for his own website and blog. Yeah. He would also like call himself the devil and all that when he was hurting these kids. So on this website, it showed his day-to-day life as a convicted sex offender, but yet he denied being a pedophile and claims to have been essayed as a child himself, but we don't know if that's true. It's possible, but we don't know. The jurors who imposed the death penalty on Joseph were offered counselling in order for them to cope with the horrific evidence that they had to see. These jurors, they had to watch videos. Joseph videoed some of his assaults, and these jurors had to watch the videos of these kids. So he was imprisoned on federal death row at the United States Penitentiary in Terre Haute, Indiana. In October of 2020, he underwent brain surgery. He had cancer. He declined any treatment. He rejected chemo, and he just wanted to die. Medical staff at the Federal Bureau of Prisons estimated he had between 6 and 12 months to live. He died on March the 28th, 2021 at the age of 58. Good riddance. His body was cremated. And I say flush the ashes down the toilet, because he is a disgusting piece of shite. Even as a kid, because I talk about these crimes, and in a lot of the crimes that I talk about, I'm like, I feel sorry for them as a child because, they went through stuff and whatnot. But he seemed like a shit kid as well. He was like a shit kid and a shit adult. But yeah, I left out a lot of information about what he did to these children. Let me tell you, there's a reason I've left it out. Because when I read it myself, I couldn't, I could not talk about it without breaking down. It's too much. I'm a mum. I can't. And I am a victim of childhood essay. So I can't do it. And yeah, I can't. So yeah, if you guys want to know the gory details about what happened to these children, the abuse, the R word, all that, you go looking, because I'm not going to say exactly what happened. All we need to know is that these innocent children were R-worded and tortured by this disgusting piece of crap. And I feel like that's enough. Yeah, that's enough. That's all we need to know. We don't need to know the gory details. That poor jury and the people in the court during these trials, they had to watch the videos. So Joseph, he was videoing the kids when he was assaulting them. There was actually, when I was writing up, my script, because I write a script up, I often go off script, but I write up a script, and when I was writing it and I was typing in, these parts, I actually deleted a lot of it. I think I deleted like a quarter of the story just because I can't bring myself to say right now, I feel like after yesterday's story that I think I posted it this morning, that talks about, children being abused as well. It got me. So because I've got like a bunch of stories ready to go, and when I picked this one up, I was like, oh God, okay. Oh, another one. I can't do another child essay story for a while. I think I'm just gonna have to stay away from those for a little bit, because it's getting a little bit hard to talk about children being hurt this way. Like yesterday's one that I filmed was about Sister Kathy and what happened to the kids at that Catholic school. Yeah, I feel like it was hard to tell that story because it's children, but they were teenagers. This one, these are children, like they're still children, but this one was harder. I feel like because they're like my kids' ages, maybe. I don't know. Well, I've got an old one, I've got a teenager as well. But I feel like when they're little, when they're so innocent and someone's hurting them like this, it just really freaking gets me. And I've got this little angel of a son who I've got, all my kids are angels, but this little one, he's just turned 3, and I'm like, how can anyone hurt one of you? I don't get it. I don't understand it. And I'm glad I don't understand it. It means that I'm not all fudged up like these people. I've learned to say fudged up instead of, the actual F word, because I've got this child, Logan, who copies everything I say. Yeah. So he was saying shit the other day because I may have said it. And I was like, uh-oh, I'm in trouble. But yeah, I've also got a son called Dylan. So when I was talking about Dylan, all I could see was my Dylan. It's, oh God, it's hard. It's hard doing these stories. Really, 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 really hard. Also, I'm sure you guys have noticed that throughout my videos, these little things come up, that say subscribe or join my membership thing or super thanks, stuff like that. Feel free to reply, because that's me like dropping little hints like subscribe or help, and because I don't get paid for this. Not yet. My channel's not big enough. I don't have enough watch hours. I've got enough subscribers, but then they're like, you need more watch hours. So when I got monetized, I was like, yay. But then they were like, oh yay, cool. So you can get things like those membership options or the super thanks options, where you just click on the little thing that I think is around there, and you click on it and you can pay money to the creator, which goes a long way, and we actually do get it apparently. I don't know yet because no one's done it for me. Sad times for Kate. Anyway, yeah, I can't remember where I was going with that. Oh yeah, so to get monetized, you need 1,000 subscribers and 3,000 watch hours. So I got that, and I was like, yay! I thought, oh, this is awesome. I'm going to start to get, my videos monetized, get paid for the work I'm putting into these things. Blah blah blah. I was so excited because I put so many hours into this. Honestly, like I work my butt off to get these stories out quick. Like, it's hard, but I do it because I enjoy it. But I would like to get paid as well. Would you like to go to work and not get paid? Exactly. Anyway, so I was like, oh yay. And then YouTube was like, no, you can get like super thanks and memberships, but you don't actually get paid for your work until you get 4,000 watch hours. So I'm at 3,310 watch hours. So close, but so far. So feel free to binge my videos, get my hours up. That would be fantastic, and I will love you long time. So you got 2 options. First option, press super thanks. Second option, binge watch my videos. Just chuck them on, you can walk away, whatever, get my watch hours up. I'm cheeky. Anyway, I hope you guys are having a wonderful morning, day, night. What a horrible case. If you've got any case suggestions that do not involve children being harmed like this, drop them in the comment section. I am always open to new cases. Maybe a case that hasn't been crazily talked about, because yeah, I want to do one that's not as well known. Yeah, okay, well, that's me. Have a wonderful morning, day, night, blah 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 blah, and I will be talking to you later with another story, hopefully less intense than the last 2. Yeah, bye. Ka kite. Ka kite. Bye-bye.